Once again, it's 365 Never Ending Fight. And today we're having a great discussion on medical marijuana. I have a great friend of mine, Dr. James. How you doing today, man?
I'm good. Happy to be here.
All right, you want to tell a little bit more about you?
Yeah, for sure.
People watching.
Yeah, I'm Dr. James Weeks. I have a practice in Cincinnati that specializes in medical cannabis. I'm board certified in internal medicine and actually trained at Christ Hospital in Cincinnati. And when I finished up with my residency at Christ, I worked in the hospital locally for about 10 years, taking care of people getting admitted to the hospital, taking care of them while they were there, and then discharging them.
Okay.
And then in 2019, decided to dedicate my practice to cannabis medicine and medical cannabis.
Okay.
And so now at the end of this coming month, June, we'll wrap up the third year of our us here in Cincinnati offering medical cannabis consultations. So.
Okay, that's what's up. That's how we met. I know we met through when we first talked. We was on a Zoom call.
Correct. Exactly.
I think Dr. Tiffany Deers. No. It was the medical dispensary over in.
Yeah, correct.
What? No, was that Hartwell?
Yeah, Have a Heart.
Have a Heart.
In Crystal.
Yeah, she introduced us. Yeah, she sure did. Because I had issues. I think that's how we ended up talking. I came to you just a little bit about my background. I started 365 Never Ending Fight, which is a nonprofit here in Cincinnati. This is a platform that I use to advocate, motivate, and educate on sickle cell and other alternatives to fight sickle cell. And that's how we talked. But we'll get farther into that. What made you get into the medical marijuana field?
Yeah. So, of course, like... through, let's see, from 2007 to 2004 to 2011, I was doing medical school and residency. Okay. And not in any of that period of time did they teach us about cannabis or medical cannabis. But we learned about all these other things, traditional therapies. And so, in mentioning I worked in the hospital for 10 years, we did practice a lot of those therapies over and over again in the hospital. But one thing that we did not have access to was any sort of cannabis to use as a therapy. And so, recognizing that cannabis has been accessible in other states long before it was in Ohio, we were becoming aware of that, and that there was potential here for a lot of different reasons, medical reasons, therapeutic reasons. And so in 2018, the state of Ohio passed a law to allow medical marijuana, and that became a true thing in 2018, 2019.
Okay.
And so when that happened, it was kind of a good time for me to say, hey, I've practiced this traditional medicine for the past 10 plus years, and now it's time to try this alternative medicine. And I did know quite a bit about cannabis kind of going into this from anecdotal use, and also from just reading about what's been happening in other states.
Okay.
But it was going on a whim for sure.
That's what. Okay.
Like when I let you, when all of your colleagues and even your family say, "Hey, what are you doing?"
Right.
They told me I was actually leaving medicine when I decided to leave the hospital and open the clinic, One Heart. And but reality is here we are 3 years later, and there's been lots of folks coming in, seeing us for all these different reasons, and they're all valid reasons. And a lot of them, people who come and see us, their backs are up against the wall. Not many other treatment options. Nothing else is really working. And so that's why I think that this was a good idea for me to jump into this, and I'm happy to be here now. And I think there's still a lot of room for education, and and that's in Cincinnati and in this state particularly, but also across the country and across the world.
I agree 1,000. So I'm questioning. So why do you feel when you was working through the hospital system, why they don't add or tap into the medical marijuana? I mean, what's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so like I mentioned earlier, we weren't really, we meaning traditional medicine. There's nothing that's taught about medical marijuana. Nothing in a positive manner about marijuana is talked about. Now, they would talk about negatives of actually cannabis, medical or marijuana, like addiction and this causing bronchitis when you smoke it and that sort of things. Or now the big one is they want to talk about how it causes vomiting syndrome when you use certain people use it and they get real sick with vomiting. And so they don't actually teach a lot of the positives of it and more so the negatives. So that's the fact that there just lacks knowledge and education about it in the mainstream medical system. But so like for instance, I was invited to UC Medical School to give a lecture on medical cannabis. It's the second year it's been offered ever to medical students at University of Cincinnati. And that would have been the first one would have been of 2021, second one 2022. So it shows you that all other doctors before them didn't get any education in it. So there's that, and then there's also it's the true also reality is that there's research. We need more.
Yes.
Like we'll talk about sickle cell more, I'm sure, later. But in reading about the research on cannabis and sickle cell, there is some, and there's some positive, but there's lacking.
Yes.
And that's with all conditions. And so that also could be why doctors, one, they didn't get any kind of basics on it, that it's really a safe option with not a lot of negatives down the road, coupled with not a lot of great new research coming out, or if there is, they're not seeking that. They're not looking for that.
Yeah.
We're looking for that because that's all we're doing is practicing using cannabis. So we want to know any research that there is. And so and then probably maybe the biggest one is just the non-facts like stigma.
Yes. It's a lot of just going for the negative part, because I remember back in the day we used to get tested in the hospital. First off, I have sickle cell hemoglobin SC. In years they used to speak, tell you if you get caught with marijuana in your system, they take your medication, things like that, which I never experienced it. Now some doctors knew that I added it to my regimen years ago, and which I know that it helps me. It allows me to take less narcotics, but I did have experience, and that's how we met, because I was at a certain hospital and dealing with a certain doctor, which was a new doctor who didn't even know me, and my prescription time came up where I had to put in for my prescription. He found out that I smoked weed, and he found out I had a medical marijuana card, better yet, and he denied medication, which I didn't even know they can do if you have a medical marijuana card. And it's known fact that in your chart for years, they know that I indulge on and off. But that was the really thing that really blew me away, that he had the power to make me forfeit my card, and that's how we talked about it, and we sat down and had some discussions on that. But what you think about for as medical marijuana and sickle cell? What information you have for that?
So like in regards to cannabis, we know that and there is studies that show that it helps with chronic pain in adults. And that was even governmental research funded. 2017, they pulled all the data of all cannabis studies across the entire world of any value, and they found moderate quality evidence that cannabis helps with chronic pain in adults. And there's a lot of different variants of chronic pain, of course, and sickle cell disease definitely is in that criterion for causing chronic pain. And cannabis helps also anybody dealing with chronic pain. Also, that's the physical. There's also the mental.
Yes.
And most of the time I've found any chronic condition that somebody might have, there comes the mental component, like anxiety, depression, stress about dying, insomnia. And so, you know, I think cannabis helping with the physical and the mental in the setting of chronic pain, it just is a good option in general. And it's not for everybody.
Right.
And some people don't get benefit, but it would be an additional option for people to use to, like you said, maybe improve pain, improve mood, improve quality of life, and maybe balance some of the other medicines that were traditionally given. And that's just in general, that's basic information, basic data. Sickle cell, there's a study that I found that was published in 2020.
Okay.
And it was like an observational study. And that's what the best thing that we have a lot of the times are studies that step back and say, okay, we're going to pull every person who has Medicare and Medicaid who has sickle cell and who was admitted to the hospital or went to the ER.
Right.
And we're going to look and see, like you said, they're testing you for THC. We're going to see which ones admitted to daily cannabis use. And what they found was when they pulled all that data, that sickle cell disease individuals who used daily cannabis were 1.8 less likely, 1.8 less admissions per year, and 1.2 less ER visits per year. And so that's like one, let's just even round down and say one less ER visit and one less hospitalization for a pain crisis.
Yes.
That's pretty substantial. That's just for the person, firstly, because going to the ER is not that fun, and being admitted to the hospital is not that fun.
Right.
And when you go there for pain, the general consensus is some of the folks there managing you don't really like to see you with dealing with pain, and they don't want to manage your pain.
Are you drug seeking?
Behavior,
things like that.
You come and say, I'm in pain and I'm out of my meds, or I'm taking meds that are not working.
Yes.
And so that's big, and also would be good for resources for healthcare system in general. And so that's just a basic study, and that's just saying daily cannabis use. And I'd be willing to bet that a lot of the folks who use that cannabis would be smoking it, and which is fine. But actually, what if we could expand on that, and we could use like other components of the plant, like CBD and CBN, and we could be getting more benefit out of it, and that would be probably produce even a better result of a study. But that's where we are right now.
It's good that you brought up the forward to CBD, man. And what we do here, man, 365 Never in a Fight, man, you know, the doctors always speak about pain management, right? And they speak about, and when they speak about pain management, they only speaking about the narcotics that they provide, right? Now, I'm 43 years old now. It took me a long time to get to this regimen that I'm on now. But I learned that pain management, I had to implement medical marijuana, the gummies, the tinctures, the mix with the CBD, bring in CBD by itself, and the different things like that. For example, I've been in a lot of pain. What was this? Maybe 4 days ago, and I had to implement my Oxycontin, 20 milligrams, and I had to take that with a oxycodone, 30 milligram. So I took 2 Oxycontin 20s, which is 40, a 30 of Percocet, basically oxycodone, Percocet 30s, and I had to take a Finnegan for nausea. So that's a lot of narcotic I had to take, right?
Sure.
So when I implement now my Percocet 30s, I can function better when I'm just taking that by itself versus the Oxycontin. And every time I implement the Oxycontin to keep me from going to the emergency room, the next day I go through this mental depression. It's like I'm dragging, I'm just going through the life of motion. I'm here, but I'm not here. I'm irritated. Even though I know how to manage myself, which is to stay away from people and go to a park. But what I did yesterday, the following day, first time buying the THC mixed with the CBD was 2-in-1, and I found, man, it pushed me out of my depression a lot faster than normally it would have took me, probably almost like a 7-day period.
Sure.
You know, just stopping the Oxycontin by itself. Still taking my Percocet 30s for pain.
Yes.
But, you know, but that's what I learned, man. That's the tincture, man. And I try to tell people, man, pain management is deeper than just a narcotic.
Correct.
You know, like you said earlier, they speak, you know, all the stigmas and you know, the bad reputation that marijuana received, but they never really speak about the Oxycontin.
Yeah.
You know. But, you know, and that's something I always wonder, like, even when they prescribe us with this medication, this narcotic at our doctor's appointment, they never really break down and say it's going to cause depression.
Sure.
Even though, yes, it's in the pamphlet, and, you know, but the doctor never have that conversation with the patient to let them know what they really getting into.
Sure.
What you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, that's just a reality. I mean, like, probably what you're going through is like a mild opioid withdrawal, you know, and cannabis helps with opioid withdrawal, CBD and THC, and the reality is that, like, if you're a physician or you're a practitioner and you're trying to take care of patients, you should be trying to give them, get them feeling as good as they possibly can, whatever way that might be. And I think there's just a misunderstanding about cannabis that people are just at home, just amotivational, and they're just getting high and they're just laying around. But of course, there's productive people out there, and I see them all day long using cannabis also. And so, like, if a doctor had the ability to implement another alternative medication to lessen the amount of opioids someone might need, which is what's happening.
Yes.
You still need it, but you need less.
Yes.
And so, and that, sometimes people take that as a failure, like, hey, Dr. Weeks, I'm still taking some opioids. That's not a failure.
No.
You're using less, and you have improvement in quality of life, symptom management of side effects of the medications themselves, and that's less opioids, less constipation, less tolerance. I mean, a few patients I have who have sickle cell disease, especially quite young ones, they're trying to preserve their tolerance.
Yes.
They know the road ahead might deal with more pain. I'm not trying to take Dilaudid and fentanyl. I want to take Tylenol 3 here.
Yes.
And I want to build up to these other things. And if I can use cannabis and avoid building up as long as I can, then I want to do that. And so I don't, cannabis and opioids actually, when you read the science about them, actually work better together. And actually, in people who use cannabis and opioids are less likely to have an overdose on opioids.
Never knew that.
And so, and that's protective mechanism that cannabis has to prevent the portion of the brain to stop wanting to breathe, basically.
Yeah.
So again, it's about education and about you spreading the word that, hey, and you have to go back to your doctors and other people who are dealing with this. Maybe that's how we have to convince mainstream medicine, is through proving it through us.
That it works.
Hey, look, I'm sitting here. Do I look normal? Yes. Am I working every day? Yes. Am I bugging you about pain? No. So what's the big deal? And that's the reality, is that probably if people use, if cannabis is a good fit, they would be less of a hassle to the doctors about dealing with pain and calling them and going to the ER, going to the hospital.
Yes.
So it's, and really the reality is the side effects of cannabis, usually people get them early on.
Okay.
First 1 to 2 months of taking it. And then it starts to taper off from there. You know.
What would be the side effects of cannabis?
So side effects would be like, the most common side effect of THC would be dizziness.
Okay.
And there could be other things like it could exacerbate pain. It could cause anxiety. It could cause paranoia. And so, and that's mainly with THC. And so, but once you take THC, say somewhat regularly for a month or two, then those things start to go away, and just the medicinal values remain. And so we have strategies to avoid those things, like avoid if we recognize, say, somebody's riding on the anxious side, we'll try to lean them away from products that could produce anxiety. Or if they, or if we say, ooh, this person's tells us they just anytime they take a drug, psychoactive drug, it's really strong effects for them. We'll go with really low doses, or maybe we'll add the CBD component, which would balance the effects of THC. But those are basic ones, but they do go away with time.
You know, it's funny you say the anxiety part, right? I don't know if I ever told you this. I think I did, but I'm gonna say it again. Back in maybe 3-4 years ago now. It's been a little minute. I was around a lot of death. I started dealing with this blood clot. Well, I had it maybe 10 years, a little over 10 years now, but it started to show itself through causing my face to swell.
Oh, gotcha.
So now we're a sleeve. But around this time, a lot of people was dying. Then this popped up. One day I woke up, my face was swole. Okay, that's a blood clot. Blood clot, nothing good with a blood clot. We know this. So I bought this weed, and it was a beautiful flower, bright green. Oh, it was gorgeous. I started smoking it that Friday. Come that Sunday, I was smoking it again at probably like 6 o'clock in the evening, talking with my cousin, we chopping it up. And all of a sudden, I just got this weird feeling, as if I would have said I was going to die, I would have did it right there. So my heart started beating fast. I went in there, took my blood pressure. I saw my blood pressure was high. I started going into the regimen that I normally do. Then I said, forget it, cuz take me to the hospital. I don't know what's going on. Went to the hospital, did all kind of tests. The blood clot was normal as it was 10 years prior. So I stopped smoking. And then I started creeping back again. And it happened again. And I'm like, what is going on? Went to the hospital, test, nothing happened. So now I'm sitting back like, man, what is going on? So I ended up going to California. And I went to a dispensary. And I asked them, I said, you got something for pain and anxiety? They say, well, if you want anxiety, stay away from sativa. Sativa can trigger your anxiety. And that's what I started getting into what sativa was, the color of the flower, the bright green, you know, and I realized like, wow, that's what I was smoking. And I never knew. So, I mean, what's the deal with the sativa versus indica?
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of like, to me, one of the exciting things about cannabis is that it can create different unique effects, waves of effects. So somebody might come in and say, hey, I don't have any anxiety, but I have major fatigue and brain fog and depression, and I could give them a uplifting, upbeat sativa strain, and they would do well with that because it's activating. Or maybe like somebody who has like ADHD, and the stimulant effect actually makes them kind of normal and neutral. Okay. And so that's who benefits from the sativas. Sometimes I even like patients on chemo, they're just burned out with fatigue and nausea and sativa. Okay. But if somebody says, hey, I have anxiety, or I'm like actually using this because I want to treat anxiety, then maybe in the beginning you would say, hey, we got all these other categories you could use besides sativa. Okay. And that would be the opposite one, which is indica, and then the blend of the two, which they call hybrid. Yes. And so you can pick. And so like somebody says, oh, I have trouble with insomnia and pain, and I need to just chill at the end of the night, and they could use the indica strain. And then everything now is being crossed, like a sativa male and an indica female, to create a new strain, and they call those all hybrids. Okay. So into the future, most of the strains will probably end up being hybrids. Okay. And what's interesting about that is actually when you if you look up sativa or indica online, it won't say the effect. Yeah. It'll say the way the plant looks. Yes. Because sativas are usually taller plants, and they have longer, thinner based leaves. Okay. While the indicas are usually short and stubby with more broad based leaves. And that's really the definition of a sativa and indica based off of the botany of cannabis. But it just happens that the tall ones, that the thin leaves are upbeat, and the short bushy ones are relaxing.
Okay.
But there's actually, interestingly, you're finding that the smell of the plant, which you mentioned, like the one, probably light green one, was like kind of more citrusy and florally. And that smell is the, or people say like the smell of a diesel or a gas. Or, and those are all different oils on the surface of the different strains of cannabis to create the smell of the plant. And we think that is probably truly what's creating the effect, the additional effect. And so, like on the surface of the if any plant, there's an essential oil they call terpenes.
Yes.
And so that's cannabis has over 100 terpenes. Probably about 10 of those are common. And so now, when you buy cannabis flowers, particularly, it would in Ohio they actually require them to test for the content of THC and CBD, but also the terpene content. And so people are starting to look and say, hey, this terpene, which is listed in the sativa category, kind of gives me anxiety, pinene. But hey, this one that's in the sativa category helps with my anxiety, limonene. And so as in the future, it'll be more about the terpene profile of the plant, and less about if it's a sativa or an indica. But it is a common way to categorize the strains, and when there's 100 on the menu, that's a nice way to start to break them down. But if somebody's using cannabis and they're starting to really pay attention, they start recognizing, hey, I like this terpene and I like that terpene. And then when they go to the dispensary, they tell the staff at the dispensary, hey, this is my terpene that I like to use for my mood. And then they'll be able to tell them which strains would be high in that terpene.
Wow. So it's a lot of education need, because I didn't know that it's one thing to have the side effect, the effect of medical marijuana period, but then we're dealing with the different flavors, the terpene, the flavored part, and what those could have on this on effect on you
their
too.
own pharmacological effects.
Wow. So okay. So yeah, I guess we in I call it prohibition. State,
we definitely are.
We in the infant state of it.
We are. So we think when people who are in the cannabis scene, we feel like we were very set back, but yet we are in the very beginnings.
Wow.
And we in America, actually, maybe other than Canada, and probably still more than Canada, we are at the cutting edge of all of this stuff about cannabis, the production of it, like the quality of product and the types of products and the branding and marketing, and then all this other science stuff that we're lagging on, but we're getting a lot of information. And in the future, actually, even the federal government, this was recent, they have actually, they have allowed several growers of marijuana to get licenses through them to cultivate marijuana to be able to be given to researchers to access. Wow. And it would all be, because what's happening now is there's only one place that provides the marijuana for research, and that's the University of Mississippi. And the quality of the marijuana there would not be nearly the consistency of the quality of marijuana that people are buying from the dispensaries that's being grown. So now we're going to be able to have places throughout the country who are growing high quality cannabis that will then siphon it through the DEA, then which would go to clinical researchers to be able to do research on cannabis. And that's now they're growing the cannabis at, I believe, starting this year. Wow. So never know, maybe we would get lucky and have the opportunity to do some research locally even. And
I know we talked about that. I know we talked about that prior. I would love to do it, and I would love to do it just for the simple fact I know I'm living proof, because I've been on balancing sickle cell and narcotics since I've been 17. I was addicted to morphine at 17 years old. Just thank God that I would end up being allergic to it, and it almost took me out. But I just been dealing with it. I learned even like with sickle cells, it's real like oxygen based, and smoking. I used to smoke out of these like cigarillos and things that got tobacco, and I used to always get pneumonia for some reason. I used to always get pneumonia, and once I finally switched to a cone, like a raw cone, the pneumonia part, I didn't have no more issues with that part. And then I figured out when I know when my pain get to a certain level, I know I have to go from smoking the weed to edible to a tincture, just for the simple fact that smoking is not good for your oxygen.
Sure.
With sickle cell.
Yeah.
So that's what I like about the stage we in now, for us buying weed versus buying on the street. You don't know what you're getting. When I first walked into a dispensary, I was kind of overwhelmed. I'm not gonna lie, because it was so many. It was just so many different types, and I didn't know which way was up. I'm just still looking at it, so I was kind of overwhelmed. But I do like the fact that I know what I'm smoking now. I can ask questions. I can see the numbers on it and how much THC is in it and things like that. So how do they prescribe medical marijuana? How is it administered?
So like, meaning like, how can you take it or access it, or?
Yeah, like the dosage. Is it a certain dosage people should start out with?
Yeah, everybody's different, and so like whenever people come and see me, I always it makes people nervous, but I always ask them what's their experience with cannabis, and again, people get nervous about that, and I know I have had some patients that have probably told me some stories. Yeah. Oh no, I don't have any experience, never in my life. And then by the end of the visit, they're like, "Oh, I know this, that, and all that." Oh, okay.
Right. You came out,
but that's quite important. Yeah. So, are you a cannabis naive person? Yeah. And for instance, I saw a person like that today that was 60 that had never used cannabis before, and that's okay. And we just have to start from scratch, and we just would start with I always recommend the general philosophy in medicine is go low and slow.
Yes.
Start with a low amount. Right. And if that doesn't do it, you can always go up from there. And that's worked out pretty well. And then the other thing is that other strategies that I think have worked out well is one, dose wise, would be, say somebody's new to cannabis, and we can do some strategies like start it at night. And use it at night for pain and sleep, say even for 2-3 weeks. Figure out your dose, figure out if it's working good, make sure you're not having any negatives, and then at that point in time your body has adapted to this new chemical floating around, and then when you start using it in the daytime, the dizziness and loopiness and all that stuff are less. If somebody says they have experience, then it's different, because I'm usually just trying to figure out if you've taken edibles before, how much you normally take, and you have to be, that's always worth repeating about edibles and the differences between that and inhalation, because it's quite different.
Yes, it is. Night and day.
And that's the benefit of having all those different options, because some are good for rapid acting needs, and they wear off fast, and some are good for longer acting needs. They take a little longer to take effect, so not good for some reasons, but definitely. So that's how I normally do it. And then people, if they know their bodies, you take something, you know what that effect was like, and if that was too heavy, then we maybe need to go back. And so I could even go as low as saying, hey, standard gummy is like 10 milligrams of THC. Let's just do a quarter of that and see what that does. And then I have occasionally had somebody that comes back and says, Dr. Weiss, even that was too strong. And then we're even cutting that into a smaller piece. So an eighth. Or 1.25 milligrams of THC. And we get excited when we get those kinds of cases, patients, because they don't have to take very much to get positive outcome, versus if you needed more, for instance. But
I'm going to tell you something, man. When I went to go see my son in Arizona a couple of years ago, and when I got there, he like, Dad, he got these edibles. Got it from the dispensary, and they was little square, like little chocolate squares. And I took 2 of them, man, and went back to the hotel, and I just caught myself trying to get some sleep because it was early. I sat up in the bed and walked out, and it just, man, it lasted for 2 days. The peak of it I couldn't talk.
Oh man.
I was sitting at the pool. The hotel was beautiful. We in Arizona, Palm Beach. It was beautiful. I'm sitting at the pool. Everything looked staged. Everything looked. I was moving so slow, and I felt like I was moving slow. I know I was moving slow. Like, and after later on that evening, it was like I was stuck in a position like this, where I'm talking to myself in my head. I couldn't speak. I couldn't say nothing at all. I couldn't speak. And I, my son, oh, Daddy, I'm sorry. He just apologizing. And all I could do is smile. That's it. And but I'm in my head like, man, why can't I talk? Like, why can't I say nothing? Like, and it lasted for 2 days. But the crazy part about it is I didn't have no sickle cell pain the whole weekend.
Gotcha.
So it was like, that's when I learned how edibles could be very tricky.
Sure.
And you got to be careful.
Correct.
Because I just thank God I didn't panic to the point that I almost went to the emergency room. I'm like, I ain't trying to go to the emergency room in Arizona. Like, but I'm thank God I didn't panic because I thought I had a stroke. But I'm like, okay, I can still feel myself. I just couldn't speak for whatever reason.
Yeah, and so that's this called psychoactive effect was very strong. And
Yes.
it's strong when you eat it. And so like most dispensaries and products on the packaging now even would have little warnings that will say, hey, like only take one and then at least wait 2 hours before you decide to retake it again.
Yes.
And so, and that was, they had to start kind of regulating to put that stuff on the packaging because people are so used to the normal way of using cannabis, which is inhalation and it's fast acting and predictable. And certainly by 30 minutes, you would feel the effects.
Yeah.
And so then you end up either take too much on the front end or you wait half an hour, then you take more. And it usually, some patients with proper education or people who use edibles with proper education avoid that and never experience, call it, it would be a THC intoxication is what that would be, acute THC intoxication. It's not an overdose, just in too much THC. And so most people do experience that in some form of it. Not as, yours was this severe form, which you probably ended up, it was probably like California or Arizona, so it was probably like each one was like probably 50 milligrams or something. So you
I think it was something ridiculous, man.
So you took like 10 gummies that day, you know, basically 2 chocolates equating to 10 gummies.
Wow.
And so, but, and then edibles last the longest.
Yes.
And so it just sits around and so that's a strategy though. That's the benefit of it. And so like most, I think like social media and stuff has got like, there's, you see people, posting about how they took too much and they're like calling 911 and you know they're dying, I'm dying. And so people are more aware, and actually I've noticed more people actually being scared of them now. Like they've heard from their buddies or their friends or social media that hey, these edibles can be quite strong. And so they actually will tell me, I'm not even going to try those. And I have to re-educate them to and almost convince them, don't give up on that as an option.
Right.
Instead of you taking like, it's like 50 or 100 milligrams, what if you just took 5?
Right.
And it was at night when you were like relaxing and it wasn't when you were about to go do something. And then see what that does. And then maybe that's just another option. It's not like you always have to use that. It's just another option. Non-inhalation route.
Yes. I mean, it was beautiful, man. If I could find the medium between what I took and a healthy dose, for me not to have pain for 3 days was beautiful. I mean, I haven't experienced that maybe since I was a child. So I just knew I always knew the benefit of marijuana, but to experience an edible like that, I just didn't like the part where I was stuck in myself.
Yeah, that was too much.
That was too much.
So that's the balance of that.
So if I could find whatever that other dose is, oh man, like I could see that would be beautiful, you know, just to have that. And I'm still, that's why I like, you know, when I'm happy I met you, man. And even with the CBD products that I'm implementing in my pain management, I'm trying to find my niche,
your sweet spot.
Yeah, I'm still looking for it, man. I ain't found it yet. But I have found when I leave my house, with a oxycodone, which is a Percocet 30. I cut it in half, and I leave my house with a cone, with some indica in it.
Gotcha.
And that right there lasts a long time for me. Like, I'm able to go through a whole day, a 10-hour day, 12-hour day, with no pain. And I only took one pain pill, possibly 2 for the day, because later when I get home, when I go to sleep, and I, probably take another one.
Gotcha.
But I just know it works, man, and I know it's powerful. One thing I'm gonna ask you: Do you think insurance will ever cover medical marijuana?
Yeah,
do they
so
cover?
we have they don't at the moment, and I mean we have a lot of still work to go. I mean, so probably the biggest deterrent to medical cannabis for health reasons is cost.
Yeah.
Right. And so you got cost of the doctor visit, state fee, and then you got buy the products. Nobody's ever had to buy their medicine like this other than over the counters.
Yeah.
And especially for chronic disease management. And they've actually done studies, of course, to see that the number of sales of cannabis are basically skyrocketing, and the number of over-the-counter pain medicine and traditional pain medicine is on the decline. So what that means is that people are paying out of pocket for their medicine more than ever before. And it's not just cannabis, it's like other homeopathic or alternative regimens like chiropractor, acupuncture, yoga, meditation, all these other therapies. And so and it frustrates me when I see people with chronic pain and cancer and MS and, Huntington's and Alzheimer's and sickle cell. And I got to tell them, give me your credit card at the end of the visit.
Yeah.
And why can't I take insurance? Because I'm doing a even more thorough consultation actually than a lot of the traditional doctors would be doing. Because I spend 1 hour. So why not I should be able to take that. So, but at the moment, we're not able to take that. So it's a out-of-pocket expense, and we try to work with people the best that we can to get them access and not be, excluded from the program based off of cost. And, but that's where it's at right now, is it would be out of pocket.
Yeah.
But I do think there's a future where we will be able to pay for this with insurance.
Yes.
And that future won't be too long from now. And it's just going to probably have to be in part clients of private insurance companies to say, hey, I'm going to leave you unless you start offering a stipend for alternative medicine. And, hey, $500 a year, whatever. Medical massage, you can get a couple of those. You can get $500 in medical marijuana throughout the year. And but the reality is, cost is huge. And I have some patients who are, this is not that easy to afford, and they'll say they might be on 10 meds, and they'll, in their heart, they know if they had a credit card for medical marijuana, that they could get as much as they felt they truly needed, not to buy for any friends or any of that, just for themselves, that they could probably wean off of mostly, if not all of the medications that they were taking. So that's the real reality, is that this could replace and be better than, with less side effect profile, and we just gotta, hopefully, we get to the point where we can all reap the benefit of that, and the cost will be there.